I've been reflecting on a couple of the statements in the suttas that we looked at last night, and these two statements I feel are so interesting and important about ethics. So in the sutta about the dragons growing to great size and how that's what happens when we develop the qualities of awakening, the factors of awakening, that we acquire great and abundant good qualities. It's dependent on and grounded on ethics. And to think about how fundamental sila is. And in the other one where it talked about the different vital conditions for developing the awakening factors, and the first one being good friends. That often refers to enlightened masters, in addition to our good companions that are also I hesitate to use the word striving, but intent upon awakening, intent upon development. And the second vital condition mentioned there after good friends is sila. And sometimes people really ask, why is this so important and why is there so much emphasis on it? Not that they're breaking precepts a lot or anything, but it's just, how do we understand that this is so fundamental and so deeply important? It goes beyond the superficial idea that if I do less harm, I have less to regret. And that's true, of course. But there's more to it than that. All of us are working with greed, hatred, and delusion to one degree or another. And having clarity around moral precepts and following them goes a long way to reduce the intensity of those. So when we are thinking about in terms of, not killing anything, and we start to take care of living beings, avoid harming them, and it takes a quality of care, oftentimes because they can be so annoying. Mosquitoes, ants, whatever, spiders. And some beings we're conditioned to be afraid. So we just taught the retreat at Spirit Rock, and there was a rattlesnake that was coming right up on the main patio where all the yogis walk, and just laying there, or really close by the walkway that we all walk on, and they had this little sign with a picture of a rattlesnake that said, "Rattlesnake was seen here," a little like those A-frame signs that you put out if the floor is wet, It was like that. They'd put it wherever the rattlesnake had been seen, and it would appear in different places around the area. And there was a woman in one of the practice discussion groups that I led, and she said, I'm shocked, she said she grew up in Texas, and she said, you just kill them. You don't like observe where they were and just walk around it, And I can relate, having grown up on a farm, and it's a very different mentality to see this creature as a living being with consciousness and have an attitude of care rather than, I just want to get this dangerous thing out of here. And someone suggested, well, you could have people come who will, sort of relocate this rattlesnake. But they didn't do that. And I found it interesting. It certainly increased your mindfulness. And reflecting on what develops in the heart. When we're working with our fears, our aversion, our desire, with regard to the precepts, what develops in the heart when we relate to all living beings as being like us. We don't want to be harmed. They don't want to be harmed. And probably not relocated by force either. But, sometimes, of course, this relocation has to happen. We catch mice that come in from time to time. People have a tendency to leave the doors open, even if all the cracks are sealed really well. Sometimes they'll come in and we have live trap and we take them somewhere else, and I don't know what that does to their social life. But, we try. And the important part is the orientation of the heart. Because this is so fundamental to developing and acquiring great and abundant good qualities. The ones that open the way to wisdom. And so that when we sit to meditate, of course, if we're consistently breaking precepts, that's going to come up into the mind. So when we keep precepts, or we have a high level of moral integrity, it's not just about precepts. It's also going deeper into ethics, right? And it's, or you can say it's precepts, but when you take a deep look at it, it includes many things. Do I follow through on what I say I'm going to do, for example? Or do I weaken when I really want something? And either with truthfulness or with making sure I don't take anything that isn't given, or around certain kinds of addictions. There's these precepts that are just the baseline. The 5 precepts are the baseline, but the roots of them go really deep into all kinds of things. And so this idea of not having regret is really important. But then there's also the general reduction of greed, hatred, and delusion that come with ethics. And this softening of the heart. So instead of a hardening of the heart because of fear or aversion or desire, there's a softening of the heart. There's a place in the suttas, I don't really know where it is right now, but where the Buddha says if you're willing to kill small creatures, then that can lead to the willingness to kill larger creatures, and he goes up the scale till you're willing to kill human beings. And we see this in the world. People feeling like it's correct to take the life of another human being. And and then you say, well, what happens to the conscience then? Human beings are pretty good at coping with things by blocking them out or justifying or rationalizing. And of course, we're trying to move in the opposite direction, where the mind is more and more clear, more and more calm, more and more free. And the heart is soft and open and available to samadhi and to the arising of wisdom. This morning, Ayya Chittananda and I were talking about this, the many aspects of the importance of sila. And she said, it's the water for Arahant soup. We're making Arahant soup. You know, it has a lot of ingredients, but ethics is the water. And everything is affected by it. And our ability to absorb the other nutrients in all of the other qualities and all of these awakening factors really depends upon this water. And we can't even fully fathom the protection that comes with the development of sila. And some of you can probably almost feel the story coming that I've told a number of times before now. And it's such a clear example, and it's so powerful that I'll probably say it again. And some of you haven't heard it, I know, so. I have a family member who went to Vietnam, and he was very determined not to kill anyone. And that was because of an image, a vision that he saw when he was in basic training and he was being trained to use the rifle, and he saw himself sitting in a tree and shooting this man, enemy person. He saw the hole in his head, and he said, I can't do that to anyone, I don't care who they are. And he was a very, very devout Christian, and he prayed probably pretty constantly all the way over to Vietnam. And he said what he was praying for, that he wouldn't kill anyone, he wouldn't even have to shoot his gun. I'm sure the more common prayer for many people would be that they would survive this horrible ordeal. So that was the first thing that caught my interest, is that that's not where his mind was. And he was taken into the 101st Airborne Division, which is a really tough outfit. They're known for being out there on the front lines or behind enemy lines, and that was what he was required to do. Be in a helicopter, get dropped off on a mountain, and fight. And every time he got dropped off on some mountain to fight, there were no enemy there. When, like the first time, the other missions that went out, there's enemy fighting, there's fighting, and where he got dropped off, there was no one there. And this happened again and again and again, every mission. He said after about 6 months of this, he'd just be falling asleep on the helicopter. One of the other guys would say, "How can you sleep?" And Army intelligence says there's 1,500 Viet Cong confirmed where we're going. He's like, there's nobody there. And there would be no one there. 27 missions. There's a lot more to the story, which I won't go into all the details, but what is happening? How is that possible? He was even sent on the Mekong, what was it called? The road that they were using all the time. Anyway. Ho Chi Minh Trail, something like that. And no enemy anywhere. It's like, the thoroughfare for the troops. And he says, his belief is that it wasn't just him praying, it was his mother and his family and his whole church praying. And I'm thinking, yeah, but there's something more going on here, because that was true for so many people who went to fight. I don't think it's just that alone. And then he's told me about, he doesn't like killing, he doesn't like going hunting, he doesn't go hunting, he doesn't do the things his family members would like him to participate in, because he says, I don't like it. I don't want to do it. Well, from the Buddhist perspective, of course, there is this, understanding that there are devas, there are heavenly beings that help us. And you can believe that, or you can not believe that. It doesn't really matter that much, I guess. But the point is that there's not that much difference in the beliefs to some degree, except that the Buddha pointed out that our actions matter. It's not just the intervention of some power that can protect us. It's not that alone. What's more important is how we act and speak and think. If our mind is in the vein of aversion, hatred, aggression, that protection probably may not be there. My theory is that this family member of mine has probably been avoiding killing for lifetimes. And certainly in that case he was. So, you could say, well, that's the power of intention also. The power of intention matters, certainly, but that also doesn't completely protect us. It's our intention, and it's also our action over time. Now, if you think about it, what causes you to trust someone? Yeah, they can have good intentions, but if they're not careful with what impact they have, it's not so trustworthy. But if we do both, have those intentions and act in alignment with them, there's a kind of protection that gets developed. This is karma. So when we talk about karma, a lot of times people think only about the retribution of the mistakes we've made, which of course can happen. But we also should think about the karma that gets created with all the good that we do and the ways that we avoid doing things that are harmful, especially aligned with that intention in the mind. And to have that straightness, that clarity, has a power in it. Now, one of the things that I find that happens for, especially in our Western culture, maybe our Judeo-Christian culture, is that this can sound so kind of punitive or really trigger in us a lot of things around guilt and shame. But that wasn't what the Buddha described either. It's not to take it that way, not to think of it in that way. Because it's also the case that whatever things we've done in the past, our change of action and heart make a big difference in how much weight that carries. And we want to be careful to notice if our conditioning causes us to be filled with shame or guilt, when actually all that's needed is to see what we're doing and change it, to soften the heart, to change going forward. Yes, things can happen anyway that are a result of things we've done in the past, but it becomes less and less likely. There's more and more softening of the results of the negative karma also as we move forward. And it's not about feeling guilty. So sometimes when we talk about confession, people get kind of caught up in ruminating over things that they've done in the past, and that is not the recommendation or the intention behind it. It's to recognize what am I doing that I would like to change, or can I see a better way? And if something happens that doesn't go the way we would like it to go according to the precepts, then we can reflect upon it, learn from it, and go forward taking a different approach. Especially seeing the ways in which our greed or hatred or aversion or irritation or impatience come to the fore and are accentuated by our actions or diminished by our actions. When we learn from it in this way, we can really open ourselves up to deeper development and that protection. And when the breakthrough of stream entry occurs, there's a much deeper understanding of sila. There's, in the texts it'll say that then a person really has the virtues that are loved by the noble ones. Unbroken, unmodeled. And this comes because of the glimpse into Nibbana, seeing the Dhamma. There isn't any, it's like it doesn't increase any kind of guilt or shame. That's not that's an aspect that is unhelpful, unless there's just this, there's reflection on things, but it's more about, really recognizing the wholeness, the clarity, the the clean, bright, resilience of the mind that comes from that softening of the heart and that clarity of wisdom around what's helpful and what's harmful. So that the task is not about looking through your past. There isn't anything that you've done that's a barrier to awakening, no matter what it is. The task is to move forward with a sensitivity to the hardening of the heart, or the constriction of greed or aversion or confusion around how to handle something, and to use that as an opportunity to soften, to deepen, to see how we can disentangle ourselves from our previous conditioning. Because, and disentangle ourselves from the misunderstandings of the way things work. Opening ourselves to clarity, to tranquility, opening ourselves up to peace, to happiness. And so the more, as you practice during these days, noticing what comes up, noticing any kind of fear, aversion, that desire that could encroach upon the precepts, encroach upon skillful action, and use that, reflect on it. See if you can really apply your mindfulness to it. So we're going to, this first few days in particular, we're going to be emphasizing the establishment and the maintenance of mindfulness. And this is, just one aspect, how the mind relates to our thoughts, words, and actions. Of course, in this context, the words are the ones that are just being formed in the mind, since we're not really talking. Or we can think we want to say something, we can look at those words. But mostly it's, really the workings of the heart, of the mind, when we're in this kind of agreed upon seclusion. And to, because we're being quiet, then you can really see what bubbles up from the lower strata of your conscious mind. And, if it's something that is coming in memory from the past, then it's good to let it go. It's good to see, if you've already examined it, I've already learned what I can learn from this, and then let it go. It doesn't support the mind in that development to keep running over those same old things. What's helpful is to recognize that you don't do that anymore, or determine not to do that anymore, and move forward. When you're practicing today, reflect upon or be aware of what you're being mindful of the body, mindful of form outside, internal or external, mindful of feeling, mindful of any of the other aspects of mental activity, thoughts and perceptions, etc., and recognize that distance between your mindfulness and its object. Really noticing what's there, noticing the sort of mental state that it comes with it. You know, sometimes it's feeling, but sometimes it's just a mental state. And really take that into account as you decide how to move forward. Being present with feelings and letting them run their course, unless it's something you've been through many times, in which case you can turn your attention to something else. And it's a very useful, important skill to know when to do that shift. And to allow yourself to really rest in awareness as much as you can. And probably maybe the most important thing about any reflections on sila, on ethical behavior, is the celebration of all that you do that's in alignment with precepts and the goodness in your life, in yourself, and your beautiful intentions. The beautiful intention to be here to practice, the beautiful intention to develop these abundant good qualities, and really the great progress that has happened in your life. And with that encouragement, there is this opening of the way forward.
Thank you for listening. To learn how you can support the teachers and